What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tsla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's happening with the economic calendar moving forward, talk about big factors involving the market, so what you should be watching for as time progresses. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. Anyways, what's happening with the market? We just got the PPI report that came out. The market's a little bit green in the after hours, so I was correct yesterday that the market would push higher, but I'm starting to think that the market's going to actually see a bit of a dip, just a small little dip before we get a big bounce after that to continue even higher. I'm going to break down exactly why I think that. So the first thing worth mentioning is PPI was a little bit mixed. It wasn't bad whatsoever. So the thing is, PPI month over month that came out today was at 0.2%. We were expecting 0.1%. So it's only 0.1% higher than expected. But it's not bad, guys. It's super close to what we expected, anyways. But a teeny tiny bit hot, a little tiny bit above what we were expecting. It's very, very minor. It's not like a very, very big deal. And then the core PPI month over month was also at 0.3%. We were expecting 0.2% around there. So it came in a little bit above what we were expecting. Very, very minor, though. Not really that big of a deal. It's only like higher by 0.1%. So it's nothing to make a big fuss over. Uh, on top of this, we had core PPI year over year at 2.4%. That was aligned with expectations. And then we had PPI year over year at 1.7%. That's below expectations. So very mixed data. The month over months were close to expectations, a little bit above them. And then the year over years for core PPI and all items PPI were as expected, if not below expectations. So it's a little bit mixed of a report, but more good than bad because most of the stuff were aligned with expectations or decent. And the others that were above expectations were just barely above by 0.1%, which is very minor. So not bad. Then we had initial jobless claims at 230,000. That is once again aligned with expectations. So that is decent for the market. So PPI overall was so-so. It was okay, not bad, not great. It was just kind of like in the middle. And we're going to be looking for how the market responds to that. Now, I also want to note that at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we also have the 4 and 8 week bill auctions coming out. So look for some volatility then. And that's pretty much it for data. For news about the markets, the next major catalyst is going to be FOMC on September 18th. That's only 6 days away from now and only like 4 trading days away. It's going to be very, very huge. Can't wait to see what this leads to. There's an 83% chance we get a 25 basis point cut and about a 17% chance we get a 50 basis point cut. We'll see how that goes. And for more data about the markets right now, things are still kind of mixed, going back and forth and very volatile. I didn't see anything else other than the fact that Moderna and some companies are kind of limiting their expenses. Then there's another alliance between Hyundai and GM, so another big piece of news. But that's pretty much it. I'm not seeing anything else that's too crazy in terms of news. So now let's focus on the markets. So we are technically gapping up. We're still technically above where we were yesterday on SPY. However, I think this 556 area is going to be a resistance because this is where we had a previous support, which is now going to become a resistance zone. And I think that as we hit the 556 area, you guys can see SPY did end up coming a little bit below this. So I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of dip just a little bit before we try to continue higher. I also want to call out that we formed a slight bearish divergence upon this push on the 5-minute time frame. You can also see this on the hourly, I believe. There's a slight looking trend shift that's showing momentum is slowing just a little bit. So we'll see if we hold above this or not. But I think that we could dip a little bit, and that's going to be completely healthy. But then even if we get a small dip, we will try to bounce. That's what my view basically is. Okay, so what are the levels to watch for? Watch 556 as a key zone. If we hold above that, we have potential to go up to 558 to 560. If we lose 556, if we don't hold above it, we're looking for 555 as support, followed by 553. Then 551 to 550 are at the 50 and 20 EMAs. And then we have 548 below that. So I presume what's going to happen is this. I think that the most likely possibility is SPY might get a small dip, but just watch 555 for confirmation. If we don't hold that, then we could get that dip. So if we don't hold 555, that's going to be your confirmation. This might dip just a little bit. And then I think we're going to establish a higher low. So we're not going to dump all the way down like the way we did yesterday. we come down, we could retest 553, if not like the lower 550s. Then there could be a nice bounce coming and a continuation higher into like the new highs. And we're going to try to break 556 after that. So that's what I find to be the most likely possibility. For confirmation, look at 555, see if this holds or not. If we were to lose 555, I'm looking for a move like this where we come down to one of these supports and we try to get a bounce after that. Going into next week, we just try to break through the highs and start pushing. So that's what I view as the most likely case for SPY. For ES, it's the same thing. We're fighting resistance at 55.80. We have support at 55.50, not to mention 55.30. We push up to this resistance. We'll see if we dip down to 55.50 or even a little bit below that. Then we'll see if we get a rebound after that as well. So look at 55.80 and then 5600 as resistance. Look at support at 55.50, not to mention 55.30. I think we could dip just a little bit before we try to rebound, and then we'll see how things end up going from here. But I think there's a good chance that 55.50 could be tested. We could even go a little bit below this before we try to rebound. And overall, the chart is still bullish nonetheless, as we're still making higher lows and higher highs. So look for a little bit of a dip and a bounce as the most likely case in my personal opinion. For Nvda, I think we're going to be pushing into the 120s by next week, but for the time being, there might be a little bit of a dip coming. So look at our supports currently at about the key EMAs. We have 115 as support. If that fails us, we're looking for 112 to 111, and then even like 110. But even if we do dip down to like 115, if not 112, this range down here, we could try to rebound and continue higher next week. Even on by Friday to get back into like the 120s. So look for a little bit of a dip and a bounce, in my personal opinion. But I still think the chart is bullish nonetheless. For others out there, we also have Tesla. Tesla's dipping a bit. We're looking at 225. If we don't hold that, we're looking for a test of 222, followed by potentially even like the 218 zone. We have resistance at 225, not to mention 228. I presume we might be dipping to a bounce 222, if not 220. And even if we do dip, we could still bounce, because if you look at the last couple of weeks for Tesla, we're technically on an uptrend. Why? Because we had the slow here, came up, made a higher low, higher low, higher low, higher low. So I think we're going to be making another higher low before we try to bounce again. Might dip a little bit to these EMAs, 218, 220, that range. We could be dipping to the lower 220s before we try to get a bounce after that. For NQ, it's the same thing. We could be dipping a little bit. I think it might be testing 19,100, if not 19,000 flat, before it tries to bounce again. If we end up losing 19,245, that's your confirmation of a little bit of a dip that's coming. If we break past 19,350, we could be looking for 19,500 as resistance. I presume it might dip a little bit, then try to bounce. So look for it to get into the lower 19,000s before the bounce comes. The resistance at 470. If that breaks, we're looking for 474. If we end up dipping, we're looking for basically 466 as support, not to mention 463 to 461. I presume that we could be dipping all the way down to about 466. If that fails us, we're going to be dipping to the lower 460s before we try to bounce back up. But if anything, I think that the QQQ has potential to dip lower. We could dip just a little bit to 466. If that does not hold us, we'll be approaching the lower 460s before we try to get a bounce again. So watch 468 and 466 as supports, and then we'll see if we bounce off those lower levels, which I think we're going to most likely do. For Apple, we have resistance at 223.8, not to mention 226. We have support at 221. I think we could just kind of shuffle up here for some time, maybe dip a bit before we try to bounce. So it's doing a good job at holding up. For the IWM, we're also shuffling. We have 210 as our resistance and 208 as support, followed by 206. I think we just consolidate between 208 and 210 for some time. Maybe even dip a little bit lower before we continue to push for that 212s. So we still look bullish nonetheless. For Coinbase, I think that we're also bullish, but we might dip just a bit to retest the mid 150s before we try to bounce for the 160 area. For Amazon, we're barely at 184. If we break out, we could be looking for 185 as resistance. If that breaks, we're going up to about 188. It could dip a little bit first to 182, maybe a little bit lower before we try to bounce back up for the 188 area. Meta looks more bullish. It's still holding up. As long as we're above 512, we favor the 520 area. If we lose 512, we could be dipping, but this is favoring upside for the 520 zone. For Microsoft, we look like we pushed up to 425. We are dipping just a little bit. Might consolidate a bit, maybe dip a little bit lower, closer to 420 before it tries to bounce up, and before we get the next leg higher. So just watch for that. We could be dipping to the lower 420s before we try to bounce. Google is doing a good job at holding up. This looks more bullish. As long as we could break 155, we're looking for 157. If we lose 153 or 20 EMA, then we could dip a little bit. But even if that does happen, I still think we will bounce and eventually fill this imbalance, get closer to 158. So whether we come down to the low 150s and bounce, or if we just continue from here, I do see us eventually pushing for the higher targets. I think the chart's bullish nonetheless. That being said, I thank you for listening, guys. I'll be back in a couple of hours for another update. I think the market may dip a bit before we try to see a bounce. Overall, we're still bullish, so don't be too worried if you do see a little bit of a dip, and we'll see how things go. I thank you for listening. Please have a great day. I'll see you guys in a couple of hours for another update. Until then, thank you and peace out.